Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to AMA. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So, as I've said, subhanAllah, there are a lot of questions that can be answered within 60 seconds, and there are a lot of questions that can't be answered within a minute, and they require a lot of elaboration. And there are many questions that are related, and most of the questions that have come in have to do with the topic of divorce. People that are going through a difficult divorce, people that are fearful of divorce, people that are at the tail end of a nasty divorce, and they're really asking about how they should carry themselves and asking for advice for themselves. And I want to first and foremost put a disclaimer forward that this is not a substitute for counseling and getting the advice that you need, bidnillahi ta'ala, from someone who's qualified one-on-one, but this is really just combining some of these questions and giving nasiha, giving advice. As someone who has had to conduct far too many divorces. Now, obviously, divorce is not haram, but it certainly is resorted to frequently. And the goal of building family in our community, inshallah ta'ala, healthy families, and a healthy community by that, means that when we try to conduct nikahs, we intend that these nikahs remain stable and firm bidnillahi ta'ala for the long term. So obviously, when you go into a nikah, your intention is to stay married and not to have to exit that marriage. Now, things happen, and another disclaimer that this is not referring to extreme situations of abuse, violence. This is different. I'm talking about the majority of divorces that happen in our community that are usually, due to incompatibility. People just no longer want to be together. And obviously, we have to connect this to the broader context of not fixing things anymore, right? We replace things. We don't fix things anymore. We're hasty. We're constantly on demand, and we are constantly looking for instant gratification. And a lot of times we enter marriage with high expectations and with the desire for instant gratification. And so once those expectations are shattered and that instant gratification is realized, then what remains after is not much. And so it is a sad situation, a growing situation. And again, sometimes it's necessary. It's not haram. But at the end of the day, we definitely have too many of them. And so this video is really for people that are looking for advice, particularly as it pertains to their akhirah, their hereafter. They don't want to do anything that's impermissible. They don't want to do anything that's haram, that brings about the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the process. And so the first thing that I'm going to say is, that famous ayah, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ, that whoever fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will make a way out for them, and Allah will provide them from places that they never expected. This actually comes in the context of divorce. And I will say this, and I hope, inshallah ta'ala, this quote lives. I've thought about saying this on the minbar, if I haven't already, to be honest with you. The Prophet ﷺ emphasized taqwa, piety, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God consciousness in marriage. And I have not seen anything in which people have less taqwa than divorce. If people don't even have taqwa in their marriages, then people certainly have much less taqwa usually in their divorces, because when you're divorced, you're trying to destroy the other person. Half the time people are just trying to get revenge. They feel like they've given so much of themselves, and now I want vengeance at this point, right? And that's where taqwa really, really, really has to grab you, and it really has to stabilize you, because it can become so easy to submit yourself to that. And so the first thing I say, if the Prophet ﷺ emphasized taqwa in marriage, I emphasize it in marriage, of course, like our Messenger ﷺ, and emphasize it as well in divorce. And Allah Azza wa Jal connects taqwa to talaq in Surah Al-Talaq and Surah Al-Tahrim quite a bit. Be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear Allah in regards to the rights of other people upon you. Do not wrong someone because you feel like you've been wronged. Do not hurt because you feel like you've been hurt. And it may be that a person could be mazloom, could be wronged, and they have the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then they become the zalim instead. They become the transgressor, the oppressor instead. And so they lose the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the process. So maintain the status of the one who is showing ihsan, the one who's showing excellence. Do not become something that is unrecognizable in the pursuit of revenge. That's not who we are, and that's not for someone who loves Allah and who longs for a good place in the hereafter. So first and foremost, ittaqillah, Be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout these proceedings. And this is for the person that's involved in the divorce. This is for the person that might be consulted, a family member. Unsur akhaka zaliman mazlum. Help your brother, whether he's oppressed or whether he is an oppressor. And many times families get involved, and to help my son in his divorce, right? I might be helping him in regards to his dunya, but I might be earning him a place in hellfire. To help my daughter in regards to her divorce, I might be helping her in a dunyawi sense, or think that I'm supporting her as I need to from a worldly perspective. But if I'm supporting her in wrongdoing, I might be securing her place in the hellfire and also taking a share of that sin myself. We have to be people who put Allah Azza wa Jal before everything else, especially in these uncomfortable situations and these very unfortunate situations. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not let your hatred for a people cause you to swerve from justice. Allah ta'adilu, i'dilu, be just. And that is closer to taqwa. That's closer to God consciousness, closer to piety. So first and foremost, be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone else does not have taqwa with you, that does not give you the license to not have taqwa with them. That's number one. Number two, haste is from the shaitan. Haste is from the shaitan. Al-ajalatu min ash-shaitan. Haste is from the devil. Ta'anni min Allah. And being very calculated about what you do is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ warned us about speaking in haste. He warned us about saying words in haste, and especially in anger. As Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, أَوَّلُهُ جُنُونَ وَآخِرُهُ نَدَمٌ, that the beginning of anger is insanity and the end of it is regret. Every single measure that we find from the Sunnah that relates to speaking is to speak carefully and be calculated with your speech. What then of something as consequential as divorce, as consequential as ending a relationship, sometimes a relationship that's lasted for years and where other people's lives are also at stake? Do not be hasty. Slow down. All of the measures of the Sunnah in regards to divorce. So, for example, not conducting the talaq during the menstrual cycle, during the hayd, waiting for an entire cycle before you issue a talaq, not just issuing it in the midst of an argument. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that, even in jest, not to use this word. It's a serious word. It is a serious decision to make. Slow things down. Abide by the Sharia process of proper consultation, proper counseling, proper arbitration, proper thought, proper introspection, trying to resolve your disagreements. Don't play with someone else's life like that, right? It may be that the other person is more vested in the marriage than you. Don't play with their lives like that, because again, that could come back to haunt you in your life and your hereafter. So slow down. Number three, do counseling, especially if kids are involved. You owe it to them. You owe it to yourselves, and you owe it to children as well to go through counseling. I've never seen anyone who, well, I don't want to say never. I've rarely seen people who believe that counseling will work before they actually do it. And if you don't go into counseling with the intention of resolving your issues, you're not going to resolve them, because it needs your intention. It needs your buy-in. It needs you being vested. But if there are other people's lives involved, especially, and just even if it's the other person that you're married to, you really owe it to them and to yourself to go through counseling and to go through the proper arbitration then if counseling fails, so that you don't wrong even as you go through with the dissolution. So take things easy, abide by the Sharia, abide by the laws here. Their iddah is there for a reason. Abide by their iddah properly. Very few people abide by their iddah properly. Go through the process. The process is meant to slow things down so that you can make the best decision in this regard. Now, if things fall apart, never weaponize your children against each other. That is one of the most evil things that a person can do, is to weaponize the children against each other. Do not bring them into this. Look, at the end of the day, and again, I'm talking about normal situations. I know that sometimes there's fear for life, and there are other factors that are involved. So don't take this video in the place of that one-on-one advice. But never weaponize children against each other. And what I was going to say was, at the end of the day, that's still going to be their mom. That's still going to be their dad. And you don't want to make them hate the other parent. You don't want to wrong the other person in regards to their rights, their huquq, in regards to their children. So do not weaponize the children in this regard. And don't cut the children off from the other parent. Again, there are only extreme situations in which that is lawful. And, that is something you'll be asked about from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a great violation of taqwa. Number 4, do not try to take more than what is lawfully yours, what Allah Azza wa Jal has allotted to you. Again, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And the last thing I'll say here, dear brothers and sisters, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَنْسُوا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. Do not forget the good times between you. Don't forget the times that you shared. You know, that person you've given a significant portion of your life to, and they've given you a significant portion of their lives. And there's a lot of amana that's involved here. You know, if the Prophet ﷺ said, al-majalis bil amana, that gatherings are by amana, that when someone confides with something in you, that you hold that trust sacred, the trust that you had with each other, the secrets that you shared, the intimate moments that you shared. Don't forget all of that, the friendship, the hard times. Go back and think about the times that that person helped you through something. Of course, one of the reasons why marriages often fall apart is ingratitude, right? You see all of the flaws in the other person. You don't see the times they helped you. You see all of their shortcomings. You don't see your own. You see all of the bad times. You forget all of the good times. Don't do that. Think about the times that they helped you. Think about the times they were there for you. Think about the low points and be grateful for those things. Do not flush that all down the toilet. And the last thing I'll say in this regard is that's still your brother and sister in Islam. So all of the ahadith about the rights of the brother and sister in Islam, this is now after the divorce is finalized, they still apply. And one of you believes until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. They still apply in regards to the right of salam, the right of, to not be mistreated, to not be wronged. All of these things still apply because they're still your brother, they're still your sister in Islam. So again, dear brothers and sisters, be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as you go through this. Slow things down. Do not throw everything out the window so quickly. Take your time. And, I'll say this, and I intended to say this actually towards the beginning of this, hopefully short advice. Sometimes knowing the Sharia in this regard is very important because knowing all of your options is also important. What I mean by that is, if it's one talaq, for example, even if the iddah expires, there still can be a coming together with a new nikah contract. So just because you're past the iddah, for example, if you only have one talaq or two talaqs, does not mean that it's all over. You can still come together with a new nikah contract. And I say that, for example, because I've met someone who, after 10 years, did not realize that he could have gotten back with his wife, and they wanted to get back together because they just weren't aware of the rulings. So learn, inshallah ta'ala, about what your responsibilities are, what your rights are, what your options are in this regard. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease the situation for every single person that is going through this, especially for those who are wronged in the process, those who are abused in the process. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restore your rights. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve your dignity. May Allah azza wa jal make a way out for you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your pain. May Allah keep you firm and steadfast upon His way and that which is pleasing to Him, so that you don't relinquish His aid. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you paradise. May Allah azza wa jalla grant you al-firdaus al-a'la with our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma ameen. My du'as are with all of you who sent in these questions. And inshallah ta'ala, I hope that this advice helps. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.